Greetings! Welcome to the American Woodshop. Today we're going to build an entry door together, and this is the gem right here. Have you ever seen a door like this? And we're going to use simple to use techniques so everybody can master the art of making custom doors.
The American Woodshop with Scott Phillips is brought to you by
Woodcraft, since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Craig, from the first cut to the final assembly, providing woodworkers with products that help simplify woodworking challenges. Craig.
Easy Wood Tools, American-made tools for all skill levels. For every woodworking reason. For every woodworking age. Rycon Power Tools, Pro Tools for tool pros. RyconTools.com, proud supporters of American Woodshops everywhere.
I live in historic Piqua, Ohio, and this is my favorite door in the town. The turnings make it, the hard maple frame, everything about it's right. Let's go build one. I promise that anyone can build this door. Nothing complicated about it. But there are some things that you have to do to be successful with the door. Thoughtful selection of the hardware, in this case a bronze knocker. That's a key design element for the circular pattern that you saw on the door at that historic house. And when we're making doors like this, a great square, because if the cuts are square on the pieces, the stiles, the long-running pieces, or the rails, the short pieces that connect the stiles, that will have special tenons in them. Those have to be square cut for this to all be solid and not rack when you open and close the door. And the other thing that's very important always is safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the instructions that come with the tools and products you use in your wood shop. Safety glasses, these are hearing protection, that's a must. Let's look at some key dimensions on the door. These pieces are 6.5 inches wide and 80 inches long, 1 3/4 inches thick. And that's key to any standard door opening, and 80 inches long. And then we stub this center rail in to make the total door just 1/8 of an inch narrow so that it's going to work in a 36-inch door casing opening. And then we can hand plane that down for a perfect fit. But here are the steps. The first thing I do is I take the rough lumber to the table saw, and I like to work the work pieces down so I get a true straight edge. I just do a rip cut. From there, I can take it over to a helical head planer. And I love heavy-duty planers like this. I've processed more than 5,000 board feet of wood a year. Without this 3-horsepower helical head planer, that'd make that job twice as hard. So I plane both sides smooth, okay, and select the best grade. From there, I take it over to a good long bed jointer. That's a foundation to a lot of the bigger projects in the American wood shop. Without a jointer, I can't make those edges square to the plane surfaces. And that's key to making the door parts come together correctly. And once I get those edges jointed, then I can take it back over to the table saw, get both edges parallel to that 6.5-inch width, and from there I can take it over to the miter saw and get a good miter saw, whatever you do, because the square cut is key to all of this, and this is dialed in perfectly. And I cut the work pieces to the finished lengths. That's actually called S6S. Now let's review the parts. The 4 parts of the door frame are perfectly milled now. And what I've done, I've gone ahead and put marks where the dominoes, that are the loose tenons, are going to join the horizontals to the verticals. And these are called dominoes. These are 14 millimeters thick by 140 millimeters long, a little bit shorter, trimmed them off, so they will actually fit into the holes and here half the hole is drilled. And when you glue that in there, it is there to stay. So it's never going to fail. This is a perfect way to go. Now, a couple things on using these. They have little splines on them that make it super tight. Just sand those edges off, just like that. They'll slide in a lot easier. And the other thing that's very important, when you lay out your lines, this has to be square and flush to the end, and these lines have to be very exact. That's on center and spaced out equally so that when I do this next thing to cut the mortises, which will take the European beech dominoes, I'm going to set this up on the top here for the super tight fit. That's a loose fit. This is a tight fit. And that's what I want. And so to make this cut, you can see I've done one right here, how that slides in, like so, and it is tight. You can see that. Okay, I'll pull that back out, and here's how it goes. I lay that cursor right on my layout line, bring it up, and by the way, you can see that long cutter. It wiggles back and forth to create that mortise. Hold it securely, turn it on. And I make that cut. It is on-demand dust collection, so everywhere I have a line, I'll make those cuts. So I'll get that done. I've cut all 24 mortises with the domino machine, and that will draw everything tight. Next, I need to cut a groove that's precisely the thickness of the plywood. That's a 5/16 inch cutter with a fence, and it goes a little bit past center. The plywood is a weird dimension. This is set to make that groove perfect. This is a stop cut. It starts at the blue line, finishes at the blue line. I do it left to right, both sides of the board. Okay, when I come to my painter's tape, I stop. Let that come to a complete stop before I raise it. And since this is creating a lot of dust, what I do, bring this up, that's perfect. And now I bring it on the other side. And from that stop cut, I plunge down and finish this. That will make the groove the perfect width. Okay, now, in 2 passes, what I've done is created the groove that's going to match the plywood. That's for a stop cut for a panel that's 68 inches long. Now this one on the inside gets a groove all the way through, left and right. Okay, so we'll make those cuts. Once we get these done, it's on to cutting out the plywood panel. So here are all 4 grooves in the 4 work pieces, 15 30-seconds wide to match the thickness of the plywood panel that we're about to cut, and 1/2 inch deep on the top and bottom board, 1/2 inch deep on the long-running 68-inch long grooves. And These will all be drawn together with dominoes, but the next thing, and this is critical in the beauty of this piece, is I've selected the back side of the door. It's got this defect that I'll put some trim on that will really look stellar, but this is that nominal 1/2 inch, which is 15/32, and it's clamped down, best face is down. That has a great veneer pattern on it. And what I have to do now is use the track saw to cut this square panel out so it ends up netting 67 7/8 inches long, just a hair short of 68. And so I'll cut that off, and then I'll use the long running track to rip it to width. Now, liberally, I've brushed out glue on the inserted dominoes, have everything indexed the right way so that I know exactly where the glued up surfaces go together. Glue is in the mortises and a little bit on the dominoes, but not much. Because seriously, if they were on the dominoes, as I press it down, it's going to screed it right off. I need just the right amount of squeeze out there. That looks really good. And now I walk this around. I next slide the panel into the groove that was cut, and I tap it in place. To glue the joint securely together with the dominoes, I put a liberal amount of glue on the acid brush and brush it out thoroughly. I want some inside of the mortise. Then I lift the rail and slide it home, making that interface tight. It's important to make sure you have glue on both surfaces. Next, I tap the stile gently while standing it on edge, and I work everything together, making the corner joints tight. And from there, it's just a matter of using heavy-duty clamps to draw the corners tight. You want just the right amount of squeeze out. And that's all there is to it. I'll let the glue cure out. It's over to the miter saw to cut the trim. To miter the base to create the rosette trim, the first thing I'm going to do is cut the top work pieces to length, and I'm going to turn on 2 dust collectors, one that catches the overflow off the back, and it's hooked into the on-demand dust extractor as well. So watch the cut here. And a good habit to get into is to let that blade come to a complete stop before you bring it up. That way you'll get a perfect cut. And now I'll slide this over to my laser line, which I bring this all the way around and lock it in at 45 degrees. And I know with this laser and my layout line, for the perfect cut, I just butt that line to the inside edge of the laser on either side. And this clamp actually works. If this 1/2 inch thick crown or base springs, well, I get a terrible cut. But this holds it flat, and as I make this cut, come to a stop, and that's the way to get perfect miter. Now, from here over to the drill press. I really like to let this door cure out for about 2 hours before I take the clamps off. Now, with these mitered corners, I can spring these work pieces in. This is 1/2 inch material, and you can see how this gives me the illusion of a raised panel edge here. And to create the rosette pattern around the edge, what I do is cut rosettes like this that goes up at the top end, and I space this out using a fence and a stop so that with the rosette cutter on this, it has to be running at a slow speed and I always have to make sure that it's clamped down. I'd simply move the mitered edge down to the stop, clamp it in place, and as I make the cut, I like to make sure that that rosette goes all the way down to this stop. Next, what I do is use this shim block right here that gives me the proper spacing, holding the workpiece in place, bring that up, butt it up to the stop, bring it down, and that gives me the perfect spacing for the next rosette. Remember, on larger cutters, you always have to secure the workpiece with a clamp. So that's the easy way to cut all the rosettes on the trim. I'll get these done, and from there, it's on to gluing and bradding them in place. All the rosettes are cut now in the trim, and to put it into position, we're using what's called micro pins, 23 gauge. And believe me, you do not want them longer than 3/4 of an inch. That's 1/2 inch material. It could go all the way through to the other side if we weren't careful. Side shields on whenever you use a pneumatic nailer like this. And this is going to go up and in for a perfect cut where those miters are very sharp and crisp. And it is clicked home. That's good to go right there. Now, a little bit of spring to it, that's good. When I go to nail it, it has to be at an angle. If I do not nail this at an angle, and look at that hole, it's tiny. You're never going to see that. So these just get pinned in all the way around, and they are there to stay. This is a decorative element. And I can promise you at an angle like that, it's not going through to the other side. We do want to draw it tight. And I wouldn't want to use anything heavier than 23 gauge. I've lightly sanded the entire door assembly and all the parts and cleaned it thoroughly with the tack cloth. And now we're using exterior 450 water-based stain first to give us that maple color. This is the hard maple or sugar maple water-based stain. And the beauty of this, beyond just giving me the perfect color, I really don't have to worry about the VOCs, and the cleanup is just with hot water. I mean, you can't beat that. It's very friendly. And then we'll just brush this out thoroughly. And once I get this completely covered, well, we'll let that cure out before it gets the top coat. And then, while it's cured, let's go do a bit of turning. We need that center rosette. I love to turn, and this is a turning workshop. And this is the rosette that's going to be on one of the two sides of the door. And it starts life out as a rough blank of hard maple, and I lay out a 12-inch diameter circle, and then I cut it out on the bandsaw. And I like to leave the line, but stay right on the outside edge of that line as I cut it out, because if it's perfectly balanced, the better the circle, the better it's going to turn when we rough it round. From there, I mount the small diameter faceplate with 4 fully threaded screws, and a good tip is to use a 1-inch diameter drill bit on the compass center pivot hole, and then screw the faceplate in place with fully threaded screws in each of the holes. And from there, I just mounted it onto the wood lathe. It spins right onto the drive spur, and I bring the tail stock forward and help balance it in place. When do you use the tail stock when you turn? Whenever you can, if it doesn't get in your way. It just adds more stability, more grace, more balance. And from here, I move the banjo in with the tool rest locked in place so I can use the bowl gouge. Now, the easiest way to sharpen the bowl gouge is with a slow speed grinder, 1750 RPM. And I like to use a 60 or at the very finest 80 grit wheel to really bring up a good burr on this edge. If the chisel's sharp, it will melt right through the wood. If the chisel is too hot to hold on to, you have a dull chisel. So face shield, rings up, off rather, and let's turn this round. And I have this on the low torque setting so that on large rough work pieces like this, as it comes up to speed, I have a lot of torque. And it says on the variable speed control here, 655. So what I'm going to do with this type of a Solnick grind, this is not a fingernail grind, I'm going to lay that on the tool rest, ease that up, and as soon as I start to get a cut, I pinch this chisel so it can't jam into the voids. And this is the easiest way to work this workpiece into a round form. I'll swing it over here, get the outside balance first, and if it skates out, it's because you didn't rub the bevel first. I'm rubbing the bevel, and I get nice shavings. The moisture content on this piece of wood is 15%, so it would qualify as green wood turning. And the cool thing with maple, hard maple like this, I can friction sand it once it's turned to get it stable, then put a good finish on it. So I'm just working this round, and then from here, this is important. It really bugs me when I see people moving the tool rest when that workpiece is spinning. It doesn't take but a couple of seconds to turn it off, adjust it safely. You never want your fingers jammed between the workpiece and the tool rest. So I'll bring that back up to speed, and I'll smooth this completely out. Let that come up to speed to get the vibration under control. And from there, what I want to do is always rub the bevel to the wood first. Then I raise the handle until the bevel and the cutting edge kiss the wood at the same time. I like this style of grind better than the fingernail grind because it really gives me a smoother cut on end grain. What does that mean? Let me turn this off, I'll show you. Okay, get that to come to a stop. And the long grain, see the grain's running this way, okay? And the end grain, where the growth rings are, is right down here, and usually that tears out. But this is a remarkably smooth cut on hard maple on the end grain. I mean, there's no tear out right there by using this technique. So I'll go ahead and work this all balanced, and then from there what I can do is back the tool rest or tailstock away, and then I'll use the round carbide cutting tool. This is a fantastic tool, stays sharp, and I'll add some cove details into the very top of this, and that's how I create the rosette. Once I like the top pattern, then I can turn the lathe off, adjust the tool rest around so I can hollow out the back ever so slightly. Again, I'll use both the bull gouge and the round carbide cutter to do that. A little bit of sanding, and then it's on to finishing. Right in the middle of this door panel, I'm drilling a 5/16 inch hole. And I've put one here in the bottom of the rosette that was turned earlier. And this is a driver for a double threaded screw. And look at what I can do now. That's long enough that it's going to go all the way through, so I can mount the other rosette on the other side. Obviously, when you do this technique, you want to make sure everything's centered up. I'll get this threaded on, then I'll flip the door around, put on the other rosette. This rosette, I didn't stain as dark because I wanted the contrast. And I love that look. And I dial that on nice and deep on that double thread. And this creates a sandwich on both sides of the door that I like very much. And so there's the plain side. And here's the show side. And that's a home run in anybody's book. Well, there you have it. Now, for more details on how to set the lock set and the hinges, be sure to check out our web extras on our website and on Facebook. Now, onward, next week, we're going to build a Chippendale-inspired medicine cabinet. It's a gem. So, hope to see you then. Stay well. Have fun in that wood shop.
Woodcraft, since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Craig, from the first cut to the final assembly, providing woodworkers with products that help simplify woodworking challenges. Craig.
Easy Wood Tools, American-made tools for all skill levels. For every woodworking reason. For every woodworking age. Rycon Power Tools, Pro Tools for tool pros. RyconTools.com, proud supporters of American wood-shops everywhere.
For more information behind the scenes at the American Woodshop, go to our website for complete details on tips and like us on Facebook.